Our News is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to Our News and thanks for joining us. I'm Jared Higgs. Topping news tonight, desperation, frustration and confusion. That was the scene at the Treasure Key International Airport where huge crowds of Abaco residents were desperately trying to evacuate the island. Many slammed the government for what they call a delayed response to the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian, which decimated Abaco. This as the Prime Minister visited the island today, promising residents that they will get off the island. Jasmine Brown reports.
Here in Treasure Key, Abaco, there were scores of people holding on to a glimmer of hope that they would get to leave an island that they say is simply uninhabitable.
It's no food, you're just eating crackers, and honestly, I had about 9 of these. My sister's cupboard is full of groceries, so I had like 9 of these, and I just don't even know what else to say.
That was the sentiment shared by just about everyone we spoke to outside the now gutted Treasure Key International Airport. Abaco residents say they are stuck on an island that has been completely destroyed. We saw much of that devastation as we drove around the island today, with dozens of homes turned into mangled messes. Trees were also snapped, blocking roadways and making some impassable. With U.S. military helicopters flying overhead and UK military vehicles on the roadways, the island resembled a combat zone. Residents say they want out now. Some of those residents say they have been stuck at the airport since Sunday, like these men who say they purchased airline tickets to New Providence only to be told they weren't being honored. Those Abaconians were not only frustrated, they were also angry as they blamed the response to post-Dorian issues.
We was trying to charter a flight from Western Air, and you got a manager on the ground. He can't even get his boss to say, well, look here, you got X amount of people that want to go. People can afford to go, they would pay. But if it ain't organized from the end, from 7 a.m., we should have had flights on the ground. Response is essential. You can't say you run in the country and you can't respond to these things. You know, because people are afraid now. Day 7 is here.
People slept here last night with babies, man. No shelter, better go. It's sad, man. Something has to be done.
Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis arrived on the island just before midday today, where he greeted residents and assured them they were not forgotten. Minnis promised to send Bahamas airplanes to pick up evacuees.
Bahamas Air will come and collect everybody. All we want you to do is just relax. The planes will be in and out all day. You don't have to pay for it. The government takes care of all of that. But also provide...
Can you please be quiet for a minute, please?
As you come in Nassau, we're also providing accommodation for you. All of that is getting sorted out so that we can transport you from the airport to the accommodation facilities. We also will ensure that the children are placed into school, but it just takes time for all of that to organize. So just be patient with us. But we're coming to remove every one of you, okay?
Now, when our news team left the island today, that crowd had diminished significantly. Evacuees with children as young as 1 month old and the injured also traveled back on the Prime Minister's plane. Reporting for Our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
The Prime Minister visited several communities in northern and central Abaco, including Marsh Harbour. Before today, Minnis had only conducted flyovers of Abaco and Grand Bahama. He told reporters he was shocked by the devastation caused by Hurricane Dorian.
As we moved into the Marsh Harbour area, seeing from the air and being on the ground, completely different. Marsh Harbour, downtown, completely decimated, destroyed. Marsh Harbour, for all intents and purposes, is completely decimated. There are hundreds of individuals at the dock trying to get out of the island.
Minnis says while many say the evacuees should be transported to New Providence, the island can only hold so many people. For that reason, he says they are looking into other ways to assist Abaco residents.
Nassau can only accommodate a certain amount, and so you cannot lift the entire Abaco community to New Providence overnight. So when I get home, I would have to discuss with my colleagues and with NEMA the possibility of setting up appropriate tents temporarily in the appropriate open space, dry land, etc. And once we do that, you have all the appropriate facility.
Getting into Marsh Harbour is a lot easier than getting out. Our News made the journey from south up. Here's what we found along the way. Our journey to Marsh Harbour started with a flight into Sandy Point, South Abaco. A glance out the window shows an early morning downpour somewhere up north. That's where we were heading. A 60-mile drive from Sandy Point into Marsh Harbour was the first part of our mission. At the airport, a group, some from near Marsh Harbour, had already gathered looking to get off the island. Their stories were heartbreaking.
It's totally finished in Marsh Harbour, totally gone.
When I'm trying to fight to get out my house, the screw back door closed with my kids in the house crying, windows blowing out, front door glass blows out. So, you know, it was a terrifying experience.
We caught a ride with some customs officers who were luckily down in Sandy Point. When we asked them about getting back to Sandy Point for our return flight to Nassau that afternoon, one of the customs agents assured me with no uncertainty that I would not get a ride back to Sandy Point. He also told me to brace myself for what I would see in the heart of Marsh Harbour.
Don't worry about the close flights if you get out on the flight.
The further north you drive, the more clear the destruction becomes. Downed power lines, snapped cedar trees, and heavy flooding all make the normally 1-hour drive a nearly 2-hour affair. Along the way, we pass cars stalled out in one of 3 large lakes you have to pass through. It's unclear if the owner of this BMW has written off their loss or is hoping their luxury vehicle will be there when they return. Later, a man jumps off a truck and tells the customs officer that he was robbed of $1,500 by a man with a gun. The officer gives him this advice.
Your best bet is to get to Nassau. Go that way, get on the thing I'm trying to get to Nassau.
We saw that man back in Marsh Harbour later on, but back to the journey. As you get closer to Marsh Harbour, the stench of death gets stronger. It is unclear if the smell is dead animals, humans, or both. After passing a group raiding Abaco groceries, we make landing in Marsh Harbour. It was like a scene out of a war movie. Outside the government clinic, hundreds gathered. Inside, dozens more were seeking treatment. In the heart of Marsh Harbour, everybody is either on foot or driving a vehicle that has sustained heavy damage. Cars with windows blown out were the norm. Officers walked around with weapons and United States helicopters whirl overhead, landing in the center of town. As soon as they touch the ground, they're off again. Residents of the migrant communities quickly whisk us away to their now flattened villages. The homes are badly damaged and some are reduced to rubble. They tell us there are a lot of dead bodies to still recover, including 3 men trapped in the rubble of a church. Many have stories of having experienced loss, including LaShawn McIntosh, whose 8-year-old son, Lashino McIntosh, drowned during the terrifying ordeal.
My only son. So hurtful, he just come back from Nassau. He was away. I don't even know what to say. I never thought this would happen to me.
Her partner, Bronson Williams, tells us he had to retrieve the boy's body himself.
They give me a bag, I gone, with my friend, we get him. I put him in the cooler myself. First time I ever been there, I put him there myself.
After that heartbreaking encounter, we had to keep moving. The next stop, the government complex, which resembled a favela after being taken over by hundreds of displaced residents.
It's really horrible. People dying and people sick. Yeah, and no food like that for us. I mean, you get no good shelter.
Horrible. Everybody using the bathrooms on the floor. You know, everybody washing their clothes with pure water. We don't have no water to wash your clothes. Everybody clothes sitting up and getting dirty.
Right now we want to cook, we ain't got nothing.
Exactly. Everybody, they sucking no gas, doing what we can do. We just like, what we can do at this point. Cause they need to find a solution to get us like off this island, because this island, mean, everything mash up, dead bodies everywhere. We walking through the water, decomposing. Them bodies in my skin and starting to catch rash. Can't get nowhere, can't get home. Everybody roof, mess up. It's horrible.
22-year-old Gentile Bartlett is a mother of 2. She says one of her kids is in Grand Bahama.
My 1-year-old, she fine, and Freeport, I don't even know how my other daughter doing. You can't, you know, cell service, you can't reach nowhere, you can't call. Well, with BTC, only with alive, and I have BTC.
While the circumstances were daunting for some, others, like this man, were happy to have a full stomach.
It's more like, it wasn't, I can't complain. I can't complain because the Lord done released the warning to me that I know about it. I can't complain. I can't complain. I've been eating night straight.
Where have you been sleeping?
I find places to sleep.
Outside the facility, more desperation. Clothes hanging from trees, makeshift tents set up to block the sun. We wanted to speak to more people, but time was running out. The options were try to hike a ride 60 miles to Sandy Point or get on a flight out of Marsh Harbor Airport. We decided to try the Marsh Harbor route, and it's probably a good thing we did, even though it cost $50 and a pair of rain boots for a 5-minute ride from the government complex to the airport. At the airport, hundreds were gathered outside, the vetting at the gate prioritizing women, children, and the elderly. Luckily, we were loaded onto this champagne-colored truck transporting passengers to the waiting evacuation aircraft. We could breathe a collective sigh of relief. Over on Grand Bahama, relief efforts are underway as planes bringing relief begin to land at Grand Bahama International Airport. Kyle Joaquin was there as many residents sought to get off the island.
Here on Grand Bahama, a lot of residents are eager to just get off the island. Just take a look just behind me. A long line of people just eager to get at least one seat on an airplane.
We have been doing, and what everybody through this community has been doing, is just taking everything out because everything was lost.
In Freeport, Grand Bahama, it being 3 days since Dorian left the island, she, like so many others, are still cleaning and removing all of their belongings that were destroyed during the storm. But she said what's been disappointing is the lack of relief that she has seen come to the area.
I haven't seen aid on the ground, and I think that's one of the things that everybody wants to see. People walking through the community is house to house, almost like they do during campaign time, house to house, giving out goods, giving out water, giving out blankets, giving out beds. That's really what the people there want to see. We want to see that they actually care by being on the ground. And if you look here, you can see where the water
line
settled. That's not necessarily to say where the water was when it came rushing in. And so everything has to be started from scratch.
And it was the same for Lynn Knowles in Sunset Subdivision, whose house from the outside looks sound, but on the inside, it's ruined.
And I told my kids, y'all pack a bag, y'all let's go. And as I was going, I was blowing my horn, blowing. And my neighbors, he told me, said once he heard the horn blowing, he knew something ain't right. So he jumped up and he tried to save his dogs in the back of the yard. Like I said, when I reached out into the road, the water was then to the bumper.
I see the watermark here.
Yes.
That's above your head.
Right. And I'm very short.
Now, just to show you how high the water came in here, take a look at this watermark. Now, I am a pretty short guy, but this right here can show you not how high the water came in, but how high the water settled. The assessment team from the National Emergency Management Agency landed on Grand Bahama just before noon and made stops in several subdivisions. But they never made it to East Grand Bahama with the fear of time restrictions and potential flooding further down. East Grand Bahama is the area with the most severe damage, and it's where rescue efforts were still underway with fears of what could be in McLeanstown, the furthest point on the eastern end. It's where Lloyd Smith lives. We met him at the airport seeking to leave the island with his family. And after a 14-hour walk to see his home post Dorian, Floyd says the community is gone.
It's really nothing to really go there, to really checked out.
You think McLeanstown is gone?
Basically, it's wiped out. It's a lot of rebuilding. We can, definitely we can rebuild, but that place is smashed, man. Smashed, and we got about 5 houses that can be restored.
Residents of that community were urged to evacuate. Unfortunately, not everyone heeded that warning.
As far as I know, we've lost a few people up there, and I can't give you the exact count, but I know for sure that we lost some folks up there. And there are persons who got hurt and were airlifted, and we're still waiting on reports from them. Other than that, I heard from quite a bit of guys. 7 of us walked from the horse stable on the highway, Grand Bahama Highway, all the way to McLeanstown. It took us about 14 hours.
Back in Sunset Subdivision, the cries for help and the need for relief rang loud.
To be honest with you, nothing came this way as yet. Now, like I said, from the time that it happened, it's been where I rest my head, came here, and I'm here basically all day, still trying to take stuff out of the house to try to at least absorb some of the water, absorb some of that moisture out of the clothing, to try to salvage whatever could be salvaged.
Relief efforts now continue into the weekend as food, water, and other supplies are airlifted and brought in by sea to the island. From Grand Bahama for Our News, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
As hundreds of evacuees arrived in New Providence, they relived the nightmarish conditions they endured during the passage of that killer storm. Jillian Gray reports.
Hundreds of families continue to pour in from Abaco, many of them telling harrowing tales of survival.
The only thing we could have do was pray that we could have get out of the house because we couldn't stay in the house. The roof was leaking like a faucet. So the only thing we could have do was pray.
I mean, all the shutters just get ripped off, and glass was flying, windows were breaking. We survived in my bedroom closet.
To feel walls bend the way they were bending, absolutely terrifying.
Cadero Albury and his family flew in today from Spring City. He said he witnessed homes collapsing and roofs blowing off. Treasure Key resident Stan Sawyer shared a similar account. As he waited with his dog S'mores, he recounted how his family of 6 and their 2 dogs had to huddle in their closet. But it was Selena from Central Pines whose story was truly heartbreaking. The young mother had to wait out the winds under a table with her sister and 1-month-old baby. She said prayer was her only comfort during that time. But even when they got to the shelters, there was still no relief, as conditions were poor and the mental state of the people was deteriorating.
Horrible there too, because people just had the place cooped up, pissed up. We slept on the floors and stuff like that. It was not comfortable, we barely slept. People on the island that are actually losing their minds right now. Yeah, I was at the government clinic for about a night, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, the guy came running through the hall screaming, "Help, help, they trying to kill me." Then it was the other gentleman, he was saying he running from stuff what he see.
Selena said she can't understand why people would choose to stay on the island in those conditions and urged her fellow Abaconians to get out while they can. The worst part of the ordeal, she said, was the growing stench of death. In her words, the Mud and Pigeon Pea areas were the hardest hit as trailers from the dock smashed homes, pinning bodies underneath. Selena said she witnessed a truly heartbreaking scene.
I was at the government complex and a guy was right next to me and he was getting a garbage bag to go and get his son's body out of the house. His son was trapped and he couldn't do anything, so he left. He went back to see if his son's body was still there, and he was looking for a garbage bag to go back and get his son's body.
Despite the horrendous conditions, the spirit of community did come alive in certain areas.
We came together and we made trips to the food store. At the food store, we saw that it was already damaged. People was already getting food and water and stuff like that. So basically, everyone up there who had trucks went up. They got food and water, and we shared it throughout the community, just to make sure everyone could have, had something to eat.
Amid questions over the delayed release of the number of people who have died as a result of Hurricane Dorian, Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands says there is now a new arrangement in place for the release of the death toll.
We have agreed a process whereby the health team will compare the figures that it has with the Royal Bahamas Police Force so that we avoid giving any mixed information. And we have agreed to do that after 5 p.m. daily.
So who will be disseminating that information to?
The Prime Minister will be the one disseminating that information to the press.
Sands acknowledged reports that some of the deceased have been taken to Rand Memorial Hospital, where he says there are coolers. He insisted government has no interest in suppressing information.
What we want to do is to make sure that the information that is given is accurate. We expect the death toll to rise, as I've said, significantly. And I am sure that your reporters have seen uncollected bodies on the ground.
More than 100 people have been transported to New Providence for medical treatment in the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian, according to Sands, who also revealed they are able to adequately manage all of the human remains in the morgue and coolers at Marsh Harbor Clinic. However, he admits the removal of human and animal remains has posed a logistical challenge. He added that some of the persons on the missing list are possibly deceased.
There are missing person lists, unidentified remains. Some of those remains will possibly be a match to the missing persons list. With the lack of communication, cell towers down, no power to charge up cell phones and so on and so forth, a number of people thought to be missing simply can't communicate. And so I suspect that this process is going to take some time, weeks, possibly months.
In the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian, Immigration Minister Ellsworth Johnson has announced that all domestic apprehension exercises in the affected areas are suspended. Johnson said in a statement, "As we are experiencing a humanitarian crisis, strict instructions have been given to the Immigration Department that our concentration is on assisting with the humanitarian efforts to rescue and save lives regardless of origin, nationality, or immigration status." Still to come on Our News, infectious diseases a major concern for health officials. Plus, the U.S. ramps up assistance efforts. Stay tuned.